do frameworks like TOGAF have a place in the cloud universe?
It's an okay, that's really interesting question.
Hey, Eddie, how are we doing today?
I'm good, Brendan. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, well, Eddie, thanks for making time to connect today and have a bit of a chat. Sort of by the way of introduction for you, you're chief architect at Provoke. From sort of our discussions in the past, you've built a couple of successful startups before coming to Provoke and exiting those. And also you've been sort of working in enterprise customers across New Zealand and also globally. What I want to do today is to sort of get a bit of, a few of your sort of insights around sort of your role as chief architect at Provoke and sort of broadly thinking about architecture holistically. So you're ready to kick in and get this going?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So, hey, really, really appreciate that, Eddie. And hey, for the people out there that are watching, I hope you appreciate it. It's Halloween in the US today, so I've got my Halloween shirt on. So I'm bringing a bit of color to this Provocative Bytes. So first up, some basics, Eddie. Like from your point of view, like what is architecture?
I think the way I look at architecture, it's a field that helps serve a blueprint for for a single system or for multiple systems. It's a high-level view of how everything functions or is supposed to function, right? And then there are various subparts to architecture. So you got your enterprise architecture, your data infrastructure, which now also includes cloud, application, which some people like to call solution, and of course the business architecture at the very end.
Well, cool. So like, how is architecture really different? How's it different from technical design?
Um, so I think an interesting question, right? So in terms of architecture, it's basically a logical implementation of anything, while design, I look at it as more of a physical implementation. So architecture describes what and where, and design typically describes how. So design is typically your UML, wireframes, and things, while architecture has various views and various views and models that showcase how what and where the functionality is going to reside and exactly how it's going to get executed.
Oh, cool. Hey, just before you mentioned cloud, and obviously the world is evolving. There is a big push to public cloud, but also as part of this, a lot of organizations are sort of on the agile wave. And I think some people think, hey, really agile doesn't always align with a lot of, planning. And it seems that in some situation, architecture is really limited to the discovery phase of an engagement, or maybe sprint zero. How do you think about architecture in an agile cloud world? And sort of how does it continue to be involved in the SDLC?
I think it's an you're right. Like Agile has definitely questioned how the architecture is, and where its position lies in SDLC, the new SDLC that we think about. Look, I think from my perspective, architecture is constantly changing view in most environments, right? It's never constant. If you limit architecture, typically, and most customers think about it, is that you try to limit the architecture only into the design phase of a project, and then design discovery, and they assume that the world will stay constant, uh, you know, um, and nothing is going to change. And that's so against the agile philosophy of constant iterations and everything's evolving continuously. On the other end, what typically happens is um, the people that follow agile to its core principles, the manifesto level principles, they typically think about the statement that exists in that manifesto on best architecture. It emerges from self-organizing team. While while this is true, there comes a point at which the decisions that need to be made or the problem to be answered is too big for any one self-contained team, and that's where you need architects to jump in and help how things fit in together. Now, actually, SAFe did address some of this concerns in their iteration of Agile manifestos, where they recognized that there was a need for intentional architecture. at least to be available to the teams and things like that. Now, if you look at a successful architecture, right, it's typically resilient. It's typically loosely coupled. Uh, it's supposed to be well-reasoned design of decisions and how, but it also needs to have a wiggle room to allow changes in, you know this does not happen by accident, and this is very difficult to execute on the fly on the journeys, where things are constantly evolving day in day out and stuff like that. So it needs to be driven by somebody,
Yep.
whose focused role is on that, um, who needs to focus on the design qualities and make sure things like that. So architectures, I look at architects in an agile world as typically someone who can help define the rule of the road on what are the rules, what are the boundaries under which the team needs to keep on progressing so that they're moving forward in one direction instead of getting pulled technologically on all directions based on how the user story is written, and things like that, right? Um,
Makes
but
makes a lot of
yeah,
sense.
yeah, but also like architects typically have been known for their, ivory towers, known for their execution of, controlling absolutely how things need to be, and that has changed in an agile world. Absolutely, I think architects now are more a specialized role rather than a leader role for a system. So they need to think about that as well. It's more about, I think soft skills have definitely come in top on priority now for an architect, because you need to persuade not just the executives and the leaders in the business, but also the teams that are now following those agile principles and trying to progress on their own. So yeah, a lot has changed.
Yeah, cool. Like a couple of sound bites in there, intentional architecture. Like for me, that resonates. Like I think when we're building software, like just being intentional about what you're doing and understanding the outcome is super key. Building soft skills, like and sort of that concept of the ivory tower. Like I think we all know, we've all experienced when it comes down from above and thou shalt. It's not as enjoyable. And so, if you've got a team and architects specifically with soft skills that, I love working with the team and collaborating and communicating. I think that goes a huge way to driving a successful outcome. So as we think about intentional architecture, in a lot of ways, security is really replacing some of the other aspects of how we think about architectural objectives, scalability, extensibility, maintainability. So when you think about like building security into a cloud platform, how does architecture play a critical role in that? And ultimately, how does it mitigate business risk?
Yeah. So let me unpack that question, right? Because it has quite a lot in that. So I think from an architectural objective, so all the architectural objectives are important. Like there is no one particular one that stands out, right? So, but it has always been a case that one of the objective is always top of the mind for everyone. Today it's security, right? Early days of cloud, it was scalability. Before it was extensibility, at the times of SOA, when the SOA was completely new. Um, and then it keeps on changing. It keeps on changing on priorities of the world and things. But I think from security definitely is top of the mind for most IT leaders that we work with. Um, when you look at business risk right now, some of those risks that I talked, so some of the objectives that we talk about, right? So scalability, extensibility, and things like that. Many of them have been uh, you know resolved at a level which is really important. For example, cloud gives you built-in scalability, extensibility, no matter. So nowadays service oriented architecture or microservices is a common approach to designing systems, and that gives you that extensibility and things like that. So the focus has been now left on security because uh, it hasn't reached a level yet. And mind you, it has undergone the biggest change in the posturing that typically happens. So systems were safe and sound on-prem or in the private clouds, within the confines. And then the cloud just erupted everything and moved, there's a huge push to move to cloud. Uh, and doing that, what has happened is more and more applications are now exposed to the public public internet, and that typically leads to a lot of security exposure. And you could see that from various data leaks that have happened in last few years. So and hence security is top of the mind of most IT leaders. And it's something that needs a base level adoption. The question that I get asked around this also, is quite similar. Um, there's a question that gets asked around how much do you rely on the cloud's built-in security, and what considerations do you typically do for an application when you're designing it, uh, and it's more to it. So thinking of your cloud premise as your state or as your country, and you're well protected inside it, but your data still needs to travel outside that location, outside your cloud premise. Not everything is being processed on your end. Um, you've got a lot of client-ended processing that's happening on your browsers. You've got a lot of data that's flowing from one system to the other, even crossing your cloud tenancies. Sometimes crossing from one tenant of yours, like one public cloud, to the other of yours. And this is where there's a risk of data being leaked, or there's security issues, and that's something that application architects need to think about, on how do you have security baked into your application, no matter where it's hosted. Um, More and more, again, the second change that has happened in terms of it is, not only did we move from on-prem to cloud, but we are now talking about multi-cloud, hybrid cloud setups across the world, and that typically means the IT leaders want the option to move from one tenant to the other whenever they want. And that mobility is going to create a lot of security exposure that's going to result in your application having more and more security, different type of security, no less, but more and more security baked in.
Yeah, I think that multi-cloud story that we are certainly seeing coming out. There's certainly a number of boards that are asking for sort of less vendor lock-in and saying, "Hey, we need a multi-cloud strategy." The reality is it's complex, and it does
Yeah.
require planning, and it's a trade-off at the end of the day for how we go about it, achieve that for customers. I've got a couple of quick fire questions for you as we wrap up today's quick call. From your point of view, is it realistic for a senior developer or a lead developer to also play the architect role?
I think I think there are some skills that an architect typically has, that's around vision, that's around trying to see things that are not even in sight, and stuff like that. Um, I think I've seen lots of senior devs becoming an architect without crossing that lead dev position. On the other hand, it all depends on those individual skill sets than the role perspective.
Yep.
Uh, because I see some of the lead devs, uh, they typically have an option to be an architect or move into a principal engineer positioning. So it all comes down to whether you have the skill sets that are required for being an architect.
Cool, cool. So I guess if we think about a senior developer or a lead engineer, they could probably perform the architect role pretty well with a bit of coaching and mentoring and sort of support from an architect in the business. So you could conceptually scale your architects a little bit, and also, I guess, provide some people with food for thought and career growth.
Absolutely. Like, I think I do it. I do it with my teams right now, where we're short of architects. We always would be short of architects, because it's a skill set that's really niche and limited in the market, especially with cloud and so many things evolving around modern applications, right? And one thing we have done is set up a program where we get we've identified few folks, and we work with them closely and helping them nudge towards the architecture, and then provide them with tool sets, with models, with support on how to do things. um, if, Either way, it works out really good. Either the person picks it up and starts his journey to be an architect, or if not, he at least gets an understanding of what's involved in architecture, which opens his mindset to think about some basic concepts when writing the code.
Cool, cool. Quick question, yes or no? Should architects code?
Yes, absolutely. I think you know you need to do what you talk about. So it's not just about talking; it's also about doing. You should be able to roll up sleeves and write code once you do, you actually get a different respect from the devs on your team, because they understand what, because you understand what they're going through, and they understand, they respect that, and that's a really important skill to have.
Excellent. I agree. Like, I think, everybody needs to be able to roll up their sleeves and do a range of different jobs. We're in a multifunctioning world. Last question. Do frameworks like TOGAF have a place in the cloud universe?
It's an okay, that's really interesting question. Like, fundamentally, TOGAF or Zachman, those frameworks typically were not written from in a cloud era, but to be honest, they were written a lot more at a generic foundational levels. So most of those components are still valid because those have not changed. The way to design them, the way to draft it, they don't fit how they don't align with agile that easy. And that's something that needs to be baked in, that you're not gonna be able to follow 100% agile or 100% TOGAF, no matter what, whether you're a team or an architect himself. But the lots of good guidances that frameworks have that are still valid in this market, um, till a new framework evolves that's more modern. You know, so I definitely still refer to TOGAF, because it's still it has proven its validity for years and helped me along my journey.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, well, Adi, thank you very much for making some time for us to connect today and sharing some thoughts. As we finish up this quick interview, what's one interesting thing about Adi that the world doesn't know?
Oh, it's uh, like everyone knows that I've done startups, but the reality is I've done 6 startups and crashed 2 of them, and crashed big time. Um, and yeah, that's not what many people know about. I've actually learned a lot more in those crash than those successful startups. Um, and yeah, that's absolutely something that people don't know about me.
I tell you what, sort of fail forward. It's key to what we do. Often to your point, you learn a lot more from failures than you do from successes. And being humble enough to acknowledge that you've had a couple of fails, I think is super key to sort of how we all grow. So, Adi, thank you very much once again. Been great to chat. Look forward to doing another follow-up session at some stage in the future.
Thanks, Brendan. I would love to.
Cheers.
Bye.